Today we are talking to Doug about decisions. Decisions. They are so scary, and they can be painful. I find the most painful are the ones that are based on my own opinion, sometimes because you're kind of out on your own, wondering, am I doing the right thing? And that's why I think it's such a valuable skill for people in business, especially leaders, to master. So Doug knows a thing or two about making great decisions. He is Doug Sondheim is a leadership advisor, a consultant to some of the best and the brightest. He's been at this for like 20 years or so. I can't believe it.
I do have a bald spot, just to prove.
And his client list reads like a who's who, right, of American companies. So I hope they're all American. Citigroup, Chubb, Harvard Management. Help me out.
Yeah.
Who else he talked to? Time Warner?
Citi, Lehman, well, I call it Barclays these days, but yeah.
All right. And he's a prolific writer. He writes for Harvard Business Review, and he's written an amazing book dating, 2 or 3 years now, which is Smart Risk Taking.
Yeah,
I'm
taking
paraphrasing.
smart risks, yeah.
So let's get started. And my first question is simply going to be, why are decisions so hard to begin with? What is it about making a decision that can be so difficult?
Yeah, I wrote a blog post this morning. It went out. It was called "Complexity is Killing Me," and I think that decision making's always been hard, but the reality is we're just bombarded with more information than we can handle these days. And cutting through the noise, the signals have always been there, but the noise has gotten louder, and there's just more and more noise. So how do you assess what's signal, what's noise? And at some point, I think you raised a great point. You have to go with your own opinion. Right? You've got to figure out. I've gotten enough expert advice on this. We've got to go forward. The challenge when you get into an organization is it's not just your opinion anymore. There's a lot of opinions involved. And let's say that you're part of an executive team of 10 people. How do we move forward if I have my opinion and that seems good, and then this person's got their opinion, that seems good, and guess what? They're not the same opinions. How do you build alignment in a complex situation? And especially, I think decisions that are easy no one talks about because it's obvious and you make them and it's a 5-minute agenda item at a meeting. The decisions that are tough are ones where there are multiple right answers. There are lots of different things that could work. And you're not going to know which one's right until 2 years down the road after you've tried to execute it. And how do you bring a group together to choose a path under those situations? And that's really, when I work with senior executive teams around decision making, it's those tough ones. Who should be our next CEO? You know, there's lots of different ways to go down that path. There's a nominating committee, there's a selection committee, and they're all making tough choices, and that's a classic, very tough choice. So complex information, a lot going on. When you get into a team environment, everything gets magnified. So
you mentioned who should be the next CEO. Could you kind of list for us, based on your research and experience working with these high-level people, what the top 5 really tough ones are? Strategic decisions, M&A kind of stuff. What's on that list?
You know, some of the big tough ones are, we've got a cash cow right now, but it's kind of, we're losing momentum around this cash cow, and where do we put our time and energy in finding the next cash cow, where that one is not maybe earning a lot of money right now, but we're going to have to put a lot of resources against it. It's hard to pull people out of those sorts of decisions or get them into those sorts of decisions. I mean, Clayton Christensen, 20 years ago wrote a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, which talks about it's hard to innovate because you're making tough decisions about products or markets that may not have promise right now. And as a leadership team, how do you figure that out? So that's a big one. It's often around figuring out how to cut things that you don't want to do anymore that did hold promise. People decisions are also some of the biggest ones. Like I've helped companies with CEO succession planning, and that I will say that done well, that is a 12 to 18 month very thorough, thoughtful decision process that you have to go through. So, I mean, those are some of the big ones. Those can be parsed into lots of different types of decisions, but it's usually, again, places where there are multiple good decisions.
Are executives pressured to make decisions faster than they used to. You mentioned the influx of information. We're getting bombarded, as you said, every day by a lot of noise, even within our own company. There can be a lot of noise. And if it's not noise, it's just too much to distill, to say, okay, this is informative, this is rational, this is going to help me move forward, therefore I will.
Yeah.
But actually getting to that point can take a lot of time because of the volume. So is it taking more time to make good decisions, and is that a problem for most of us?
I think the reality is the speed of information that's coming at us is faster than it's ever been. And so to the degree that processing that information is an important part of the decision, it's harder to make decisions these days than it was years ago. Also, you make a decision, and the implications of that decision vet themselves out in a much quicker digital environment. But I think it depends on the industry that you're a part of. I think that certain industries, software development versus oil drilling, are industries that lend themselves to different speeds of decision making. I mean, software, let's make a decision very quick that we're going to try this feature set out. We'll do it for a year. There's not a ton of hard costs involved, and it didn't work. Oil drilling, I mean, you're going into massive capital expenses to look for oil. We want to maybe take some time to really vet and think through these things. So it depends on the industry that you're in. And the information kind of services world and the digital economy that we're part of lend themselves to faster decision making. And I think the people who can get better at it, doing it faster, will have a competitive advantage in those industries.
Sure. So a lot of us who make decisions, for us it goes something like this. I look back and I got great results. I must have made the right decision. That's not necessarily true or how this should really work, right?
It depends on how you measure results.
Okay.
I say that a great decision is a decision where the results show up to be positive over an extended period of time. It's not a quick bump in revenue, or it's not a quick win by some narrow set of decision criteria or results criteria. It is something that has a positive impact on the people in the organization, has a positive impact on your hard numbers. And so it depends on how you're measuring success of a decision. And I'd say if you're measuring, we as a senior team have a line that these 5 things are the most important things, and we've made a decision, and we measure those things 12 months later, and we've made a positive impact on those things, it was a good decision.
Now how do we do it again? It becomes
that measurement process is much rarer than we would all think or hope that it was. There's still, a lot of it. Yeah, it felt good.
Right.
Let's go back and actually, measure against these metrics. It doesn't happen enough. It takes discipline.
So let's lean from that question and answer to the framework for making good decisions. Now you've kind of thought through this a lot.
Yeah.
Can you share with us, and if you want to turn to the board, go for it. But
let's see,
what does that look like?
where these slides are here, but so this is how I think of decision making. Is a diamond, meaning there's a divergent process where we're gathering data and information about a decision, and then there's a convergent process where we're actually aligning and coming to a decision. And pretty much any problem with a decision in an organization can be drawn back to this diagram. So I'll just kind of frame out a few of the classic ones, which are: we don't do enough in the beginning to actually explore points of view, perspectives, research, data in the market, to really get options out on the table before we feel like we have to turn the corner and make a decision on them. The converse of that is we spend way too much time out there trying to find data, trying to find information, discussing it over, and we never turn the corner to get to a decision. So the key to good decision making is figuring out how to have expansive processes to deepen our understanding, and then have some decisive processes to line on the best path forward. Every organization is different, but there are some very specific ways to do that. I'll give you one very, very important way that's often missed is, how do I just gather data from the people closest to me that would have insights? There's a book a couple years ago called Crowdsourcing that came out, which is, if you source insights from enough people, you begin to see patterns in those insights. And You may not want to go out and market research an idea to 5,000 people, but if you just talk to 10 people that you know in your industry and another 20 inside of your company, you get pretty darn close. And a lot of people never even do that, right? They're just going on a gut sense, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time and energy. Pull that data, get some key insights. We've got some real thematic insights as to what we think are the main decision criteria, and then let's go forward. It's one of the things I actually help most of my clients with, is just systematically gathering the stuff that's already lying around the floor in their organizations and getting that into some real key insights.
Mm-hmm. What about confidence? You just described this, I'll call it a dichotomy, right? You want to go with your gut, you trust your gut, and yet there's this data that's kind of pulling at you. Or maybe your stakeholders are saying, look at the data, don't just trust your gut. At what point does the leader have to kind of wrestle that down and say, you know what, I'm confident enough, I'm experienced enough, I'm going to go with it, and I'm going to not pay as close attention to what either my stakeholders are saying or my data is showing me, because I'm out to do something new. That's a very tough thing. That's kind of the art of it, I think, for me anyway. Not ignoring data, but saying, thank you very much, but I need to find out on my own. So I'm going to decide and do this. I might fail at this, but I'm going to do it anyway. How do you actually pull that off? And I can tell you what I do, but that's probably not anything you should replicate.
Well, so I would probably disagree a little bit with the premise.
And my boss is sitting right there, by the way. So there I go.
Well, so it's a couple things in there. First, what's the downside of failing? If the downside of failing is really small, you can just throw a whole bunch of stuff against the wall, and whatever sticks, you're going to go with it. But what I would argue is that you're always pulling from data in every good decision. Now, if you walk in an organization and you're a new CEO and everything's been going in a certain direction in that organization for a long time, and people are saying, well, we should do A, B, and C, and you look around and you say, the data set that everyone in this organization is pulling from is such a limited data set. They haven't seen this part of the market. They haven't seen these patterns that I've seen somewhere else. I'm going to say, no, I want to go down this part, even though I'm probably going to get some pushback from some of the executives on my team. In that situation, you could argue, well, you're not pulling on the data that they're giving you, but you are pulling on data. You're pulling on the pattern of data you've seen over time somewhere else. And I'd say our best decisions, we're always pulling on some data, even if we can't put our finger on it. It may be just this gut sense. I mean, you could argue that the famous line from Steve Jobs was, I never did any market research to figure out how to build the iPhone.
Oh, he totally did.
And so maybe he did, maybe he didn't, who knows? But in reality, he was just talking with people for decades about what they wanted, what they didn't want. It wasn't formalized from some market research company with a nice binder around it and delivered to him, but it was research and it was data. And he drew on his experience of just human nature and what humans wanted. So we're always making decisions based on data. I think where we get into trouble is if we just don't have any data. Well, I like this thing, I'm going to just try it. Well, that's going to get us into trouble. But I'd argue you probably don't do that.
No.
And people in this room, you wouldn't be sitting here if that's how you ran your career.
Well, do you guys do it? I mean, don't be shy. Anyone just kind of make stuff up and say, that's my decision? No one does that. Okay, great.
Right,
just checking. Checking.
A lot of times the data is very skewed and narrow.
Right.
And that's where bad decisions continue to progress because people stay in the tunnel.
Right.
Right on. Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the issues.
Right. And I would argue, like in the example of that organization, if you stayed with the narrow data set that people are delivering you, you're going to be in trouble.
Well, and the filtering of all that data.
Right. And the processing of it.
The process of that data.
Right.
They may have a huge database, but it's the filtering of what the executive, by the time it gets up there, it's so filtered that you don't really understand. It becomes very narrow.
Right. Yeah. I profiled about 38 cases in this book that I wrote, Taking Smart Risks, and one of them was a really interesting story of a guy ran kind of a tool and die shop. He ran a custom injection molder, excuse me, I'm mixing my Rust Belt companies. He ran a custom injection molder. He made plastic parts out in Cleveland, and the market really got just brutal. They were losing market share to people overseas who could source this stuff, and he was, at his wit's end trying to figure out how to run this company, and just went out and started talking to me, Ford Motor Company, these different contracts of his. What do you want? What do you need? And it was during the financial crisis. There had been a bunch of layoffs, and they had found that they were missing some of the critical design resources internally they used to use to be able to design what they needed in these products to actually get sent to a custom injection molder. And they had lost a whole bunch of roles internally, being able to prototype them internally that they used to have, that they had been fired, they'd been laid off, these divisions had been cut down in order to actually take a lot of these products and test them out. Because, well, what would you think about if I was able to rapid prototype this stuff? Would you want some designs? Sir? He ends up getting enough feedback that he says, the whole way custom injection molding is working has changed. People want full service, front to back, beginning to end, so designing the actual ideas, the solutions, all the way through to rapid prototyping to the production of the actual pieces. And he on a whim, it seems like, to all his competitors, on a whim, invests $2 million in rapid prototyping equipment that usually only a GE or a Boeing would buy. People think he's nuts. And years later, he's gone up the value chain. He's a strategic partner to these companies, and he's really one of the big players in his business. But how did he find the conviction to do that? And I asked him, it's $2 million. I mean, when you're a $10 million company, $2 million is a big chunk of change. How do you find the conviction to do it? It wasn't on a whim. You just chat with enough people over and over and over again, and the patterns start to show themselves. And that's, I think, great decision making.
Great. Let's talk about something I know all of us experience, maybe not daily. I know I don't daily. But there are these voices. Sometimes they're in our conference room B over at ExecuNet, management team meetings, or they are sort of the makeshift committee that says, we're going to whisper to you what you should do. And it sounds so compelling that sometimes you just do it. You do what people say. Have you worked with a lot of leaders who find themselves challenged by that too often to admit?
Kind of listening to other people, outside influences. Yeah, I'd say it's a case. There's no hard and fast rules there. It's a case by case basis. There are times when you've just gotten into a corner and you're making bad decisions. You're just influenced by a set of data that's not accurate, and it really makes sense to listen to other people. There are times when the other people are just selling a comfort zone conversation that is not going to serve you well in the long term. And so I think a leader's job is to separate those, and there's no easy way to do it. I'd say the only process point that I would say is always be out there listening. You've got to be constantly out there. If I'm in my office working away and I've got to make a big decision, that's not the time I just stand up and say, well, let me just listen to this person and assess. I've got to be out there all the time, in the dialogue, in the conversation, listening to the people in the industry, because when that moment comes and someone whispers in your ear, that's the only way you're ever going to have the conviction to either say, great idea, let's jump on it, or doesn't really match with the data set that I'm seeing, I'm not going to go for that. And that's really what separates a middle-level manager from someone who can make it to a senior executive level and succeed, is the ability to separate signals from noise. Realizing that a lot of noise masquerades as signals for years and years and years until your whole company's down the toilet bowl. Right. And there's an art to it, and a science, but there's an art to it.
Well said. Let's take that question a little further.
Yeah.
How many of us, or how many people that you work with, have what you would call confidants, people who they know they can turn to? They're not noisy. They actually have a quality thought, and they've experienced it. They've experienced the result of implementing that decision. Do many of the CEOs who you work with actually have confidants that they could say, I know I can rely on so-and-so to help me make the best decision?
Yeah, I wouldn't, so I would say this, I don't know that many of them have like a mentor, someone they go to for every, insight. But they've got people they know who know different things. And they're constantly reaching out to those people to get, insights and assessments on things. And they're reaching out to multiple of those people. And, to a large degree, it's just people who they know are good thinkers, who are able to stop and just question their thinking, question their assessments. Mm-hmm. I'd say to a T, 100%, everyone's got some set of those people, and you have to. And I would argue probably everyone in this room is.
Well, I was curious, I'm going to ask
where they've gotten to from that.
Show of hands, or please chime in. How many of you, by a show of hands, actually feel you've got someone like that, or ideally someone's like that you could turn to help you make those informed, good choices? I call them confidants. You can call them mentors, coaches, heroes, whatever it is. Anyone, show of hands? Okay. How do you guys find them? Are they people you work with? Are they people outside the company? Where do these confidants live? Yes?
Mostly outside the company to bring diverse points of view, because the insiders, you're already going to get their opinion. Mm-hmm. So you get the facts, you get the information, as you said, you get the ongoing dialogue. But then it brings a fresh perspective, and I've always chosen them. Would they bring a fresh perspective that's relevant to the thoughts I'm having, to the decision I need to make? Mm-hmm. And it's more like a kitchen cabinet, if you will,
right,
than anything else. Right.
Does anyone want to add to that? Anything else from your experience that would lend more to Mike? Is it Mike?
Yeah.
Mike, my vision. Terrible. Go, good. Anyone else have a different perspective you want to share on I love the kitchen cabinet. That's so true. Anyone else? How often do you, knock on the cupboard and say, I've got a problem? How do you do that?
I don't know if it's so much a confidant as it is someone in your organization that has a great deal of integrity. That isn't bringing you a point of view that's based more than maybe 10% on their own personal incentives.
Right.
I think a lot of my peers and folks have people that they can lay out to somebody who can give them, that's going on, but here's what I really think the issues are. So I don't view as much as a mentor, but maybe somebody in your organization that's more of a truth seeker.
Mm-hmm. And it's someone outside your company?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, okay.
Someone that understands the politics at play in your team, but isn't as motivated by their own personal interests as they are by the greater good of the organization.
Right. That seems to me that it could get very Games of Thrones very quickly. I could be wrong, but no, you haven't. That's great. Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah, I would say I'm an executive coach. That truth in going outside, I think, can be valuable, because truth telling is really important. If you're internal, obviously, you have a lot of restrictions on that, and then accountability. So you have a conversation, you agree on next steps, and I try and be flexible so people can come back when they want to, when it makes sense for them, based on their schedule.
Sure.
Truth telling and accountability.
Excellent. Well said. Anyone else? Yes?
I'm an executive coach too, but I've worked inside and outside, and I find that it's helpful to have a diversity of perspective. So to have confidence inside and outside for the very reasons that have been mentioned, meaning when you can find people who can be somewhat, non-political, and at least get their perspective because they understand from the inside out the dynamics in the organization. But it's also helpful to have an outside perspective. Because they can offer some points of view that just by inherent, no matter how non-political somebody is, you're in the system.
Right.
So it's helpful to have perspectives inside and outside the system, and then to go to people who have different areas of expertise that so you're being very conscious about, what tools am I tapping into, what I think I need at that point in time, just to further your own insight, which potentially hopefully leads to action.
Great, thank you. Yes?
I think the news is different. So when I speak to more than one person, either inside or outside, when I see divergent opinions, I try to zero in on that. Because I really find that there's a lot of news, in fact, that two thoughtful people obviously somebody's got something to learn, or we all do. But I love to find that difference of opinion and zero in on that.
I bet by blending those different opinions, you actually distill something rather unique. Because if you've heard different things and are able to do something singular as a result of that, what comes out must be pretty good.
It is.
Excellent.
It's great because it's wonderful to watch as we all, people are learning from these different perspectives. And so in that process, I like to bring people together to sort that out.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. What else would you like us to know about making decisions? I mean, I learned a lot just listening to our friends here today. But what have we not talked about that we should all consider and practice, because it does help us make those better decisions?
Well, I mean, I think we've talked a little bit about the individual nature of making decisions as a person. How do I get data? And one of the things that I'm often brought in to do is to help a group make a decision together, which in many ways becomes a much more complex endeavor. And I think that really being clear about how the decision process is going to go is critical for a senior leadership team to be able to make decisions together. Giving people, one of the places one of the places that I see common disasters in decision making is when you don't give the process enough time. Is when there's some red flag on the horizon, something's changing, we've got to make a decision fast, and some senior executive or some small group says we don't have time for a lot of dialogue on this. We're heading towards a unilateral decision because I can't get alignment on it, and we did it, and then months later someone's irritated, and that executive's excuse is, well, we didn't have time. We ran out of time. What did you want me to do? And the point I always make is you had time. You chose, of all the places you were looking, that didn't show up today. Yes, there are things that show up just today and you got to make it. You got blindsided, right? But that is more the exception than the rule. And we can see these challenging things coming, but we don't take the time to really put a process in place to get the group aligned. And that process looks very similar to this, which is, I'll give you an example. One of the most challenging one was a CEO succession. This was a 40-person partnership that I was working with. 25 years old, been around for 25 years. The only people who had ever been CEO were founders. Founders are all retiring. And the whole partnership is scared that they're going to just get someone in there that's not going to be a culture carrier. It's not going to bring the culture of this organization forward. The fear was rampant in the organization. It was the kind of thing where you could imagine it's tough, we don't want to talk about it, we'll have the planning committee, we'll have some behind-the-door conversations about it, and we'll come out with a couple options and we'll let you, the partnership, vote on those. And luckily the CEO was smart enough to say, I think we're heading for disaster if we do it that way. We're not going to get the buy-in of the partnership. And we laid out an 18-month process where we went out to the partnership and said, before we think about who it should be, what characteristics should they have? What should it look like? We know that the management leadership books say a leader should look like this, but let's put all those aside. What do you think it needs to look like in your organization? Well, we got a lot of great feedback. It looked a lot like what those leadership books look like, but they decided it. A book didn't tell them what they were going to choose. And then we took those criteria, and we got real alignment on those criteria. Great, now that we have alignment on those criteria, how do people look against those criteria? You go on down the line, well, what did they end up? They end up with one of the people that selection committee thought they would end up with, right? It was a decision that selection committee would have made on their own, but guess what? 40 people felt like they made that decision. And this person who, there were some detractors from that person, you know what? 3 months later, they said, I'll get on board, I'll back them. And there was alignment that was built behind the decision. And so it's important to realize that the decision itself is important, but the process that you take to get there is oftentimes much more important, because it can make people who wouldn't be okay with a certain decision okay because they get their head into it and they can get aligned around it. So that's a really critical element of effective organizational decision-making.
Right. I'm going to go off script a little bit. And by that I mean you're not an executive career coach.
Not a career coach, no.
However, a lot of us have gone through this where we need to make a choice either to move laterally or up in the organization or out, or we are out and want to decide what's the right thing to do next. Is there anything about the framework that you've shared today that is, at least in your experience, different at all when it comes to making decisions about your own individual career path? What's your take?
I think a lot of the comments that we heard from the audience really lend themselves to a smart approach for those sorts of decisions as well. And this idea of, kind of divergent and convergent. You get out there. We talk about market research. You got to listen to your customers. Well, it's the same thing when you're looking for a job. You got to listen to potential buyers of you as an executive. What do they want? What do they need? What are the key drivers right now? What's amazing to me is we can sit there and think forever about a topic, but we can go out and have 2 or 3 breakfasts or lunch, and we have much more lucid thinking than anything we could do on our own. And I would say just trust. The patterns show up if you have enough conversations. The patterns start to show up. What's important? What's not important? And get out there is the most important thing that I would say to anyone making a decision. You got to hear the data that's out there.
Right. We have not heard from our friend Declan, and I want to quote put Declan on the spot and say, can you share a word or two about decision making? Because I know you host a group that actually wrestles with this topic somewhat differently, where it's more individual sort of. Well, I'm going to let you explain exactly what you do, and maybe share a little bit of that insight with us.
Essentially, actually, decision making is one of the reasons why people would join the business peer group. And just for perspective, it's a group of your peers, no competitors in the room. It's probably a 12 to 16 sort of body meeting monthly. And inside your own organization, most people want something from you. You're their boss. You're the CEO. They want to please you. There's a sense of sympathy bias. They may be smart. They may be able to give you a good opinion. Even in a one-to-one with a coach, that's a consulting role, the notion that all of us are smarter than any one or two is essentially the basis for getting to a group, a peer group, where the input is unbiased. They don't need anything from you. They're objective. They'll tell you the truth as they see it. And a wider perspective. Someone talked about a variety. There's nothing as good in the room as getting, if everyone's bobblehead darling and giving you the nod, that your decision, yeah, they're all agree. Where's the debate? Where's the conflict? Where do you dig deeper? And that whole variety of opinion, it still leaves you with a decision, but at least you get perspective and a wider perspective from an objective group. And I tell you, so many of the people that I meet, there are a variety of reasons to join decision making is one. And we make decisions all the time. Some are small, but some are important, an investment. Or do we get rid of that guy who's been in the you-know-what for years and underperforming it? Where's the momentum to do it? But decision making is a critical thing, and most of us need someone else to help us, either to build consensus, to dig deeper. Very few people are so decisive to make all the decisions on their own. If you are, good for you. You live with
And usually doesn't end well.
Well, I think we're everyone. I'm enjoying the conversation and the exchange so much more than I bargained for, because I know we would be talking, but you never know what others will be thinking and sharing, and you've shared an awful lot. We can continue this, doing our little, meet and greet and getting to know each other better. There's lots of Danish for sure and coffee. So please stay and let's do more of that. I want to formally thank Doug for his time today and sharing his insight. And your marvelous questions and your time and attention mean a lot as well. Declan for, as Mark said earlier, helping us pull this all together. I know he'd love to talk to you more about what Visage can do for you. And I want to also say that we intend to do more of these. This is a new sort of environment for ExecuNet, and we want to do a series of these. And I know it's kind of informal, that's kind of how I am. Show of hands, would you guys like to do more of these on different topics? Doug might be back. I can coax him back. Our next session will be the end of July. We'll be talking about accountability and what it means to be accountable as a leader, and also give your directs enough authority to be responsible and accountable. Interesting topic. So I hope to see all of you at that one as well. I'll be sitting here as usual. So yeah, thank you. Please stay, have some Danish, coffee, air condition. Summer school, only better. Yeah. All right, thank you all. Okay.